I raised my daughter alone for 20 years after losing everything. At her wedding, my in-laws stood up and humiliated me in front of 300 guests, calling me unqualified, until I fought back with what I had been hiding. His face went pale when he realized what I had done, and that his empire was about to collapse before the eyes of everyone he had ever known. Welcome to today's narrative. Please show your support by hitting that like button, joining our channel family, and dropping a comment to tell us your location. A quick reminder, this tale contains dramatized components crafted for storytelling and reflection. While specific names and locations are imaginative creations, the core lessons and themes are genuinely meaningful. He raised his glass and the crystal caught the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. 200 faces turned toward Preston Montgomery as he stood at the head table, his smile practiced and cold, the kind of smile that never quite reached the eyes. To my son Connor, he began, his voice carrying easily across the reception hall, and to his beautiful bride Savannah. I sat 3 tables back, half hidden behind a centerpiece of white roses and winter pine. My hands rested flat on the linen tablecloth, steady. I'd known this moment was coming. I'd prepared for it the way an engineer prepares for a controlled demolition, every calculation checked, every variable accounted for. Preston's gaze swept the room, pausing deliberately when it found me. Savannah is a remarkable young woman. Despite growing up with so little, she's managed to make something of herself. A few guests shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. I admire that kind of resilience. He continued, his tone dripping with false warmth. The ability to rise above circumstances, to finally have the stability and security that through no fault of her own, her mother simply couldn't provide. The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples of uncomfortable laughter spread through the crowd. I watched Savannah's shoulders tighten, watched her fingers grip the edge of the table until her knuckles went white. She sat frozen beside Connor, her head slightly bowed, silent tears tracking through her makeup. She didn't look at me. Couldn't, maybe. Connor reached for her hand under the table. I saw the muscle working in his jaw, saw the way his free hand clenched against his thigh, but he said nothing. Not yet. Preston raised his glass higher. So here's to new beginnings, to families that can truly support one another, to leaving the past and its limitations behind us. More laughter, now louder, easier. The kind of laughter people use to fill awkward spaces to convince themselves they're not complicit in cruelty. I let the sound wash over me. Let Preston have his moment. My name is Eleanor Hartwell. Most people call me Elle. For 20 years, I've worked as a civil engineer in Gillette, Wyoming, a town built on coal and hard labor, where we understand the importance of foundations. We know what happens when corners are cut, when safety is sacrificed for profit, when the ground beneath your feet isn't as solid as someone promised it would be. The man standing at that head table, basking in polite applause, teaching the wealthy guests what I couldn't give my daughter, that man knows too. He knows better than anyone. Because 20 years ago, Preston Montgomery made a choice. He signed a document approving cost reductions on support beams at Silver Creek Mine. He chose his profit margin over human lives. My husband Michael never came home that night. I've carried that knowledge for 2 decades, carried it quietly the way my daughter carried the weight of growing up without a father. We built our lives on what remained, just the 2 of us making do, making it work. And now she sat at the head table wearing white, married to Preston Montgomery's son, while her new father-in-law used her wedding as a stage to humiliate me. The applause began to fade. Preston sat down, satisfied, reaching for his wine. I stood. The scrape of my chair against the hardwood was softer than my heartbeat, but somehow it cut through the remaining chatter. Conversations died. Heads turned. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. Mr. Montgomery? I said quietly, meeting his gaze across the 30 feet of polished floor between us. You mentioned foundations, stability, security. His smile flickered. Just for a second. But I saw it. I've spent my career building things that last, I continued. Things that can withstand pressure. Things that won't collapse when the truth finally comes to light. The room had gone perfectly still. Even the catering staff had stopped moving. I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the cool metal of the item I'd carried here. Michael's old drafting pencil, the one with "Build to Last" engraved along its side. I didn't take it out. Not yet. Just held it there, a talisman, a reminder. I think, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of that silent room, it's time we talked about what you've really built, Preston, and what it cost. His face had gone pale. Good. The man humiliating me in front of 200 guests was about to find out what it costs to bury the truth for 20 years. 20 years ago, on a night just as cold as this one, I learned that the ground beneath our feet is only as solid as the men who build it. It was January in Gillette, the kind of Wyoming winter that gets inside your bones. I'd made pot roast for dinner, Michael's favorite, and left it warming in the oven. He was working the late shift at Silver Creek Mine 30 miles outside town. He'd be home by midnight. Our daughter Savannah was 3 months old. She had his eyes. The phone rang at 10:47 p.m. Janet Thompson, a dispatcher from church. Her voice tight-clipped. "Elle, there's been an incident at Silver Creek. All families need to come to the site. Now." I don't remember the drive. The next thing I knew, I was standing behind a chain-link fence with maybe 40 other women watching orange emergency lights strobe across the darkness. The sirens were deafening. Ambulances, fire trucks, police cruisers, all screaming into the night like wounded animals. The air tasted of diesel and dust, thick enough to choke on. Portable floodlights threw harsh shadows across the mine entrance. The main shaft had collapsed. A woman beside me was crying, her hands wrapped so tight around the fence that the metal bit into her palms. I didn't cry. Couldn't. My whole body had gone numb except for my hands, which burned from gripping the frozen chain link. "Structural failure," someone said. A mine official with a clipboard. The support beams in shaft C gave way. How many men were down there? 14. They brought out 7 men in the first 2 hours, covered in dust, coughing, some on stretchers. Each time the rescue teams emerged, we surged forward desperate. Michael wasn't among them. By dawn, they stopped bringing anyone out. A man in a hard hat, some executive from Montgomery Energy and Resources, stood on a pickup truck and told us the shaft was too unstable. They couldn't safely continue. "We're deeply sorry for your loss," he said. "Your loss, past tense." I stood there holding my 3-month-old daughter against my chest, feeling her small heartbeat against mine, and watched the sun come up over the wreckage. The official story came out 3 days later. The Gillette Gazette, "Natural seismic activity triggers mine collapse." An act of God. These things happen in mining country. But I'd worked in construction. I understood load-bearing structures. I knew what properly reinforced beams could withstand. A week after the funeral, I walked into the Montgomery Energy Field office and asked to see the incident report. The man behind the desk barely looked up. "You should move on, Mrs. Hartwell. Company paid out the settlements." While he was in the bathroom, I reached across his desk and pulled the folder from the stack. There on page 7, cost reduction measures approved for shaft C expansion. Support beam specifications reduced from grade 60 to grade 40 steel. Estimated savings $340,000. Approved by P. Montgomery Executive VP of Operations. I took that page, folded it, slipped it into my coat, and walked out. That night, I sat at our kitchen table with Michael's drafting pencil in my hand. He'd used it for 20 years. The metal was worn smooth, but the engraving was still clear, "Build to Last." His hands had held this, his hands that would never hold our daughter again. I set the pencil down and made a promise to both of them. That was the day I stopped believing in accidents and started believing in justice. For 20 years, I carried 2 weights, grief and a daughter. Some mornings, I wasn't sure which was heavier. The first year was survival. Savannah would wake crying at 2 a.m., and I'd rock her in the dark while my arms ached from the day's work. I'd taken a job at Henderson Engineering drafting blueprints for commercial buildings. The pay was steady, the hours brutal. I'd leave Savannah with Janet Thompson before dawn and pick her up after dark. Michael's pencil stayed in the drawer. I couldn't bear to use it. The years blurred together. Savannah's first word was "Mama," spoken in the cereal aisle at Safeway. Her first day of kindergarten, she wore a second-hand dress Janet had found at a church sale, yellow gingham with a white collar. I'd stayed in the car 10 minutes after drop-off hands on the steering wheel, telling myself she'd be fine. She was always fine, tougher than I gave her credit for. When she was 7, she asked about her father. We were at the kitchen table, her homework spread between us, a family tree assignment. What was Daddy like? I went to the drawer and brought out Michael's pencil. Let her hold it, feel the weight of it. He built things. I told her. Good things, strong things. She traced the engraving with her finger. Build to last. That's right, baby. Did he build me? My throat closed. Yeah, he built you. Best thing he ever made. She kept the pencil on her desk after that. Middle school was harder. Other kids had fathers who showed up to basketball games who taught them to drive. Savannah never complained, but I saw it in the way she'd go quiet when Father's Day rolled around. I picked up side work, residential inspections, consultation jobs, anything that paid. Saturday mornings, she'd come with me to job sites wearing a too big hard hat and carrying a clipboard. By 14, she could read a blueprint better than half the contractors I worked with. Why do you check everything twice? She asked once, watching me measure load-bearing walls. Because someone's going to live here, I said. Someone's going to trust that this place will keep them safe. I won't sign off on anything that might fail them. She nodded, understanding more than I'd said. High school brought new worries, boys. Parties, the constant pull of a world I couldn't quite protect her from. But she was smart. Dean's List every semester, captain of the debate team, early acceptance to the University of Wyoming. The college years stretched my budget thin. Student loans, work-study programs, every scholarship application I could find. But she thrived. Engineering major civil like me. She'd call Sunday evenings and tell me about her classes, and I'd hear Michael in the excitement in her voice. Graduation day, I sat in the bleachers at War Memorial Stadium and watched her walk across that stage, Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. When they handed her the diploma, she looked right at me and smiled that same smile that had gotten me through 20 years of long days and longer nights. Janet, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand. You did good, Elle. We did, I said. That evening, Savannah showed me the gift she'd bought herself, a silver drafting pencil with an engraving, built to last. She kept her father's original in a shadow box on her apartment wall. I want to build things that matter, Mom. Like you. Like Dad. I hugged her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, and thought, This is what Michael and I built together. Not just buildings or bridges, but this strong, brilliant woman who knows the value of a solid foundation. I thought I'd given her everything she needed to weather any storm. Taught her to be careful, to check her work, to trust in things that were solid and true. I didn't know the ground was about to shift. 6 months ago, Savannah called with news that should have made me happy. I was at a construction site in Campbell County inspecting foundation work for a new elementary school. My phone buzzed, Savannah's photo lighting up the screen. I stepped away from the cement mixers to answer. Mom! Her voice was breathless, excited. I have to tell you something. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's perfect. A pause, and I could hear her smile. I met someone. My chest loosened. Yeah, his name is Connor. We met at a conference in Denver 3 months ago. Mom, he's amazing. He's smart and kind, and he actually listens when I talk about work. I leaned against my truck, warmth spreading through me despite the October chill. This was what I'd worked for her, falling in love, building a future, being young and happy. I can't wait to meet him, I said. I really think this is it, Mom. I think he might be the one. She laughed. His last name is Montgomery. Connor Montgomery. Savannah Montgomery, doesn't that sound perfect? The cement mixer behind me ground on, but I couldn't hear it anymore. Montgomery. Mom, you still there? Yeah. My voice came out steady somehow. I'm here. I have to run meeting in 5. Love you. The line went dead. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, watching the crew pour concrete into forms that would hold up classroom walls, making sure the foundation would hold. Montgomery. There had to be more than one Montgomery family in Wyoming, common enough name. I pulled up Google with shaking fingers. Connor Montgomery, Wyoming. LinkedIn profile. Connor Montgomery, 29, environmental consultant, Gillette WI, bachelor's in environmental science from Colorado State. Photo of a young man with an easy smile, sandy hair, wearing a fleece jacket. I scrolled down. Father Preston Montgomery, executive chairman, Montgomery Energy and Resources. The phone slipped from my hand, cracked against the gravel. I picked it up and searched again. Found a photo from a charity gala, Preston Montgomery and son Connor at the annual Mining Industry Foundation dinner. Formal wear, Preston's hand on Connor's shoulder, both smiling. Behind them, through the banquet hall windows, a familiar mountain range. The same peaks I'd stared at 20 years ago while my husband died underground. Silver Creek Mine was 10 miles from where that photo was taken. I zoomed in on Connor's face. Kind eyes, honest smile. He looked nothing like his father, softer, warmer. But the resemblance was there in the jaw, the shoulders. Preston Montgomery's son. The site foreman called my name. Something about rebar placement. I waved him off, climbed into my truck, and sat gripping the steering wheel. Did Connor know who I was? Did Preston Nomder Savannah met him at a conference? Random chance. I pulled out the folded paper I'd kept in my wallet for 20 years. The stolen page from the incident report worn soft at the creases. Cost reduction measures approved for Shaft C expansion. Approved by P. Montgomery. I'd carried this document like a talisman, waiting for the right moment, waiting for justice. But I never imagined it would come to this. My daughter, my brilliant, trusting daughter who'd spent her whole life without a father, was falling in love with the son of the man who took him from her. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and made a decision. I couldn't tell her, not yet. Not without proof of what Preston Montgomery really was. Not without evidence solid enough that she couldn't dismiss it as my grief talking my inability to move on. She'd never believe me otherwise. She'd think I was trying to sabotage her happiness. I needed more than a 20-year-old document and a mother's broken heart. I needed the truth about what Preston Montgomery was still doing, still destroying. She was marrying the son of the man who killed her father. I could have told her the truth then. I didn't. Instead, I did what I did. Best built a case, checked every measurement, made sure the structure would hold. It started in my home office at midnight, laptop glowing blue in the dark. I pulled up every public record on Montgomery Energy and Resources. Annual reports, environmental statements, permit applications. 20 years in engineering had taught me how to read between the lines, how to spot where corners got cut. It took 3 weeks to find Summit Ridge. The project permit was buried in Campbell County records, a proposed coal expansion 15 miles north of Gillette. The language was careful technical design to bore anyone not looking for problems. But I'd seen this before. The same patterns from Silver Creek. Support structure specifications barely meeting code. Environmental safeguards listed as pending. Projected timelines assuming everything would go perfectly. Nothing ever goes perfectly in mining. I cross-referenced the specs against industry standards. The numbers made my stomach turn. Support beams rated for 60% of the actual load safety inspections quarterly instead of monthly. Someone was going to die at Summit Ridge. Just a matter of when. I needed help. Rachel Cooper's byline had been in the Gillette Gazette for 5 years, investigative pieces on water contamination workers' rights. We'd met at a town hall meeting. She'd struck me as thorough, skeptical, someone who didn't take corporate PR at face value. I called her on a Tuesday. We met at a diner on the edge of town. I spread the Summit Ridge files across the table. She studied them in silence. This is criminal negligence, but I need inside sources. I might know someone. David Walsh had worked for Montgomery Energy 15 years. I'd met him during a safety consultation 3 years back. He'd quietly pointed out discrepancies, suggested I look closer. I called him from the parking lot. David, are you willing to go on record about what's happening at Montgomery Energy? Long silence. What took you so long to ask? Over 2 weeks, David fed us documents. Emails, internal memos, financial records, showing offshore accounts and creative bookkeeping. Rachel connected dots. I couldn't see the pattern of violations, payoffs to regulators, subsidiaries designed to obscure responsibility. Then she found something that stopped my heart. Ella, look at this. Rachel's voice was tight. Transfer records showing $6.5 million moved through an account registered to Savannah Hartwell. Listed as consulting fees, but there's no contract, no work product, just money moving. That's impossible. Savannah's never worked for them. I know, that's fraud. Papers rustled. Environmental violations are attached to this account. Summit Ridge permits contamination reports never filed. If this surfaces, Savannah's name is everywhere. My hand tightened on the phone. She doesn't know. She's never seen these documents. Doesn't matter. Her signature's here. Forged probably, but good luck proving that. I saw it clearly now. Preston wasn't just cutting corners. He was building insurance a fall guy who happened to be my daughter, soon to be his daughter-in-law. If the project collapsed, if people died, if regulators came calling, he'd have someone else to blame. Someone who loved his son too much to fight back. I stared at the documents spread across my desk, my daughter's forged signature on every page. Her name attached to crimes she didn't know existed being woven into a trap she couldn't see. 20 years ago, Preston Montgomery chose profit over my husband's life. Now he was gambling with my daughter's future. Preston wasn't just destroying the land, he was setting up my daughter to take the fall. 3 months before the wedding, Savannah came to me with 2 announcements. She arrived on a Saturday afternoon, letting herself in through the kitchen door the way she'd done since high school. But this time, she was holding her left hand at an odd angle, trying to act casual and failing. "Mom, you're home." Her voice was pitched too high. I looked up from the case files spread across the table, Summit Ridge documents I'd been reviewing again. I swept them quickly into a folder. Always am on Saturdays. I stood, noticing the flush in her cheeks. "What's going on?" She held out her hand. The diamond caught the afternoon light, not huge, but elegant, simple. "Connor proposed," she said, and her smile was so bright it hurt to look at. "Last night, Mom, I said yes." I should have hugged her immediately. Should have squealed, examined the ring, asked about the proposal. Instead, I stood there, calculating timelines, thinking about forged signatures and $6, $5 million in illegal transfers, and the fact that in 3 months she'd legally become part of Preston Montgomery's family. "Mom," her smile faltered, "aren't you happy?" I forced myself to move, pulled her into an embrace. "Of course I am, baby." Over her shoulder, I could see the folder on the table with her name on the documents inside. "Connor's a lucky man." She pulled back, studying my face. She'd always been able to read me too well. "There's something else." She twisted the ring on her finger. "I need to tell you something." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd done homework, where I'd taught her to read blueprints. "I'm pregnant." The words came out in a rush. 6 weeks. We didn't plan it, but... She looked up at me. "Mom, please say something." My heart was doing something complicated, breaking and hardening at the same time. This baby, my grandchild, would be born into Preston Montgomery's world, would carry his name, would be leverage. Does Connor know? He's thrilled, scared, but thrilled. She reached for my hand. "Mom, I know this isn't how you raised me, but I love him, and I really think we can do this." I squeezed her hand, looking at this woman I'd raised alone, who was about to become a mother herself, who had no idea she was walking into a trap. "Savannah, listen to me." I chose my words carefully. "Have you spent much time with Connor's father, with Preston?" Her expression shifted, became guarded. "A few times. He's intense, very business-focused, but he's been nice to me." "Has Connor told you much about his father's company, about how they operate?" "Why are you asking this?" She pulled her hand back. "Mom, if this is about you thinking they're too wealthy for us, that's not what I'm saying." "Then what?" Her voice rose. "Because it sounds like you're trying to find problems. Connor isn't his father. He works in environmental consulting. He's trying to make things better." I wanted to show her the documents. Wanted to prove that Preston Montgomery was weaving her into his crimes, that her signature was already forged on papers that could destroy her future. But without proof of the forgery, it would sound like I was finding problems that didn't exist, like I was trying to sabotage her happiness because I couldn't let go of the past. "I just want you to be careful," I said. "If you ever see anything that doesn't feel right." "I'm fine, Mom." She stood, and there was a hardness in her voice I'd never heard before. "I know you've been alone a long time. I know you've had to be suspicious to survive. But I trust Connor. I trust his family, and I wish you could be happy for me." She walked to the door, paused. "The wedding's in 3 months. I hope by then you'll support this." The door closed. I sat at the table staring at the folder with her name on it. I'd just made everything worse. Tipped my hand without ammunition to back it up. Now she'd be defensive, less likely to listen. What I didn't know was that Preston was watching and planning. 2 weeks before the wedding, Preston invited Savannah to lunch. Alone. I didn't know about it until much later, until after everything had already shattered. But when she finally told me, sitting in that dim hotel room after the reception had dissolved into chaos, her voice shaking as she tried to explain why she'd sat silent while Preston tore me apart in front of 200 people, this is what she said happened. He'd chosen a restaurant downtown, the kind where businessmen make deals behind soundproof doors, a private room. He was already seated when she arrived, wearing the blue dress I'd helped her pick out just days before, the one that hid her barely showing pregnancy. He had a folder on the table. She told me, her hands twisting in her lap. Next to his water glass, like it was nothing, like it was just paperwork. She'd thought they were meeting to discuss wedding details, maybe build a bridge before she officially became family. "He started talking about you, Mom, about how you'd been asking questions, contacting journalists. He said you were trying to sabotage the wedding." Her voice cracked. And then he opened the folder. Documents. Consulting contracts with her signature. Bank records showing 18 months of payments from Montgomery Energy to an account in her name. Environmental reports for Summit Ridge, reports she'd never seen, never filed, never even heard of, with her signature at the bottom. I told him I didn't sign those, that someone forged my name. She looked at me, then eyes red. He said to prove it. Said if your investigation went anywhere, if regulators came calling, my name was attached to everything. That I'd become the fall guy. Insurance, he'd called it. 40 years building an empire, and he wouldn't let it crumble because I couldn't let go of an old tragedy. Then he told me what he wanted. Savannah's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He said at the reception he was going to make a toast, that he'd say things about you I wouldn't like, and I had to sit there, stay quiet, not defend you, just smile and let it happen. She'd said no. Of course she'd said no. That's when he threatened Connor. Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. Said he'd tell him the baby wasn't his, that I'd trapped him. He'd manufacture evidence and Connor would believe him because, she choked on the words, because he always believes his father. But that wasn't all. If she refused, if she made a scene, if she did anything except exactly what Preston demanded, he'd send those forged documents to every regulatory agency in Wyoming. My career would be destroyed. My engineering license revoked. Everything I'd built gone. He said I could control the damage, keep the family intact. All I had to do was stay quiet for one evening. I sat there listening to her recount this, my hands clenched so tight, my nails cut into my palms. She'd been alone in that room with a man who'd killed her father, pregnant with his grandchild. And he'd trapped her the same way he'd trapped me 20 years ago by making her believe that silence was protection. "I thought I was saving you," she whispered. "I thought if I just did what he wanted, he'd leave you alone. He'd stop coming after us." That's when I understood. My brilliant, loving daughter had sat frozen at that head table, tears sliding down her face, while Preston humiliated me, not because she agreed with him, not because she'd chosen his side, but because she was terrified, because she thought her silence would keep me safe. She'd tried to protect me the only way she could think of, by sacrificing herself. But I didn't know any of this on that afternoon 2 weeks before the wedding. I was at my office reviewing documents with Rachel, planning the exposure, believing I had everything under control. I didn't know my daughter was sitting in a restaurant downtown, agreeing to Preston's terms, crying in a private room after he'd left. I didn't know she thought she was saving me. She didn't realize silence never protects anyone. 10 days before the wedding, Connor showed up at my office. I hadn't invited him, didn't expect him. But there he was, holding a folder that looked a lot like mine. It was late past 7. I'd sent my assistant home hours ago and was working through Summit Ridge documents cross-referencing violation codes. The knock on my door made me jump. Connor stood in the hallway backlit by fluorescent lights. His tie was loose top button undone. He looked like he'd been wearing the same clothes for too long. "Mrs. Hartwell, can I come in?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat heavily and placed the folder between us, thick edges worn. When he opened it, I saw photocopies of documents I recognized: Summit Ridge permits, environmental reports, financial transfers, and Savannah's forged signatures on every page. "Where did you get these?" "My father's desk." Connor looked at me directly. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "I went looking for wedding paperwork. Found this instead. Preston Montgomery's son sitting in my office at 7:30 on a Thursday night, handing me evidence against his own father. Why are you showing me this?" "Because I know what you're doing. The investigation. The journalist. I know you're trying to stop him." My spine straightened. "Does your father know you're here?" "No, and he can't." Connor's hands clenched. "Mrs. Hartwell, there's more. Older files from Silver Creek Mine." The room tilted. "What about Silver Creek?" "Cost reduction approvals, safety waivers, all signed by my father." He paused. "Your husband's name is on the casualty list?" I'd known this for 20 years. But hearing Connor say it, hearing Michael's death acknowledged by Preston's own son, made something crack open in my chest. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Savannah's pregnant. And my father is setting her up to take the fall for crimes she didn't commit." His voice broke. "I need to know how to help, how to stop him." I studied this young man. He had Preston's jawline, his build, but his eyes were different. Afraid, but not cold, not calculating. "Your father knows I'm investigating." "Maybe. He's been asking Savannah questions about you, what you've told her, what you know." That explains Savannah's distance lately. "I've been in contact with David Walsh," Connor said. "He's willing to provide testimony, internal documents, but we need to coordinate, make sure everything comes together at the right time." "The wedding," I said. He nodded. "Maximum visibility, maximum witnesses." I looked at the documents he'd brought then at my own files, 2 separate investigations about to converge. "Does Savannah know you're here?" "No. I haven't told her anything about the files about Silver Creek, about what my father's done." His jaw tightened. "I thought I could protect her by keeping her in the dark." "You thought you could protect her by keeping her in the dark?" "Yes. Was I wrong?" I thought about all the times I'd tried to warn Savannah without telling her the full truth. The careful questions, the subtle hints. "We're both wrong," I said. "But we can't tell her now, not until we have enough evidence she can't deny." Connor nodded slowly. "So what do we do?" I pulled out my phone and called Rachel Cooper. "Rachel, I need you to meet someone. Preston Montgomery's son just became our witness." After I hung up, I looked at Connor. "This doesn't change what happened to my husband." "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to stop him from hurting anyone else." He stood to leave, paused at the door. "My father taught me that weakness is a choice, that showing emotion gives people power over you." He looked back. "But staying silent about what he's done, that's not strength. That's just being complicit." After he left, I sat alone looking at the documents he'd brought. 2 paths to the same truth, finally converging. 3 days later, I would stand at Silver Creek Mine. But that night, I had something I hadn't had in 20 years. An ally inside the enemy's house. The day before the wedding, I drove to Silver Creek Mine. 20 years since the collapse. 20 years since I'd stood at this fence watching rescue crews pull bodies from the rubble. I'd avoided it since drove different routes, took longer paths, anything to keep from seeing the place that had taken Michael from me. But today, I needed to be here. The access road was overgrown, now cracked asphalt disappearing under prairie grass. The chain-link fence still stood rusted, and sagging yellow caution tape faded to white. Beyond it, the mine entrance gaped like an open wound, boarded up, condemned, forgotten. I parked and got out. November wind cut across the empty space, bitter and relentless. No birds sang here. No insects hummed. Just silence and the whisper of dead grass. The memorial plaque someone had installed years ago was barely readable, weathered by 2 decades of Wyoming winters. 14 names etched in bronze. Michael Hartwell, 4th from the top. I traced his name with one finger. The metal was ice cold. "I'm going to finish it tomorrow," I said to the silence. "Everything we talked about that last night, making this place safer, holding them accountable. I'm going to burn his empire down." The wind was my only answer. I pulled Michael's pencil from my pocket. The wood felt warm despite the cold, worn smooth from 20 years of carrying it everywhere. The engraving was barely visible now, "Build to last." "She chose him," I whispered. "Our daughter chose the man who killed you. I don't know if I can forgive that. I don't know if she deserves forgiveness." More silence. Just me and the ghosts. I thought about the last time I'd seen this place, Operational Michael heading in for night shift lunch, pail in hand, that pencil tucked behind his ear. He'd kissed me goodbye, promised we'd talk about his concerns with management when he got home. He never came home. The mine had swallowed him along with 13 other men, fathers, sons, brothers. Preston Montgomery had saved $40,000 on steel, and 14 families paid the price. And tomorrow I'd watch my daughter marry his son in a ballroom that probably cost more than Michael earned in his entire life. I wanted her there with me, I said. When justice finally came, I wanted us to face him together, but she's on his side now. The memorial plaque offered no comfort, no answers, just names and dates and the inadequate phrase, "gone but not forgotten," except people had forgotten. The mine sat abandoned. The investigation buried, the responsible parties never charged. 20 years of silence of letting powerful men escape consequences. Tomorrow that ended. I stood there until my fingers went numb, until the sun started dropping toward the horizon. Around me, the empty prairie stretched forever, harsh, unforgiving, beautiful in its desolation. This land had taken so much from me, but it had also made me strong enough to fight back. I kissed my fingers, pressed them to Michael's name one last time. "Tomorrow," I promised. "For you. For all of them. For every person Preston Montgomery destroyed while building his legacy on lies." I got back in my car and drove toward Gillette, toward the wedding, toward the moment I'd been planning for months. The silence of Silver Creek followed me all the way home. The ceremony began at 6. Golden hour light poured through floor-to-ceiling windows at the Gillette Grand Hotel ballroom. 300 guests filled white chairs arranged in perfect rows. String quartet music drifted through the space, something classical I didn't recognize. I sat in the back row, far from the family section where Preston held court. Janet squeezed my hand once, then released it. The processional started. Bridesmaids in champagne silk, groomsmen in charcoal suits. Connor appeared at the altar, hands clasped, face unreadable. Then Savannah. She walked alone down the aisle, no father to give her away. No mother at her side. The ivory dress caught the light with each step. Her hair swept up, diamond earrings glinting. She looked beautiful. She looked terrified. Our eyes met for half a second as she passed my row. I couldn't read what I saw there. Regret, resignation. Or just the weight of carrying secrets too heavy for one person. The officiant began. Traditional vows, carefully chosen readings about love and commitment. Savannah's voice shook when she said, "I do." Connor stayed steady. They exchanged rings. The officiant pronounced them married. Applause filled the space as they kissed, brief, formal. I watched Preston in the front row, that cold smile fixed on his face, surveying his victory. His son married to my daughter, binding our families while destroying mine. The recessional played. Savannah and Connor walked back up the aisle, hands linked. Behind them, Preston and his wife. The wedding party. Family members I didn't know. Guests filed toward the reception area. I stayed seated until most had left. "You okay?" Janet asked quietly. "No, but I will be." The reception space was stunning. Round tables with tall centerpieces, white roses and hydrangeas. Crystal chandeliers casting warm light. A jazz trio setting up in the corner. Open bar already crowded with guests. The head table sat on a raised platform. Savannah and Connor in the center wedding party flanking them. Preston and his wife to Connor's right positioned like royalty overseeing their kingdom. I found my table near the back. Rachel was already there, nursing a club soda. David Walsh sat 2 tables over, catching my eye and nodding once. Everyone was in position. Dinner service began. Waiters in black vests delivered plated meals with military precision. Filet mignon, roasted vegetables, some kind of fancy potato thing. The food was probably excellent. I couldn't taste any of it. Conversations buzzed around me. Business associates discussing deals, society women comparing vacation homes, the comfortable chatter of people who'd never worried about making rent. At the head table, Savannah pushed food around her plate. Connor leaned close, saying something I couldn't hear. She nodded but didn't look at him. Preston surveyed the room with satisfaction, occasionally greeting guests who approached to pay respects. Then servers cleared the main course. The room quieted the way it does when people sense something formal coming. Preston stood. He adjusted his jacket, picked up his champagne glass, surveyed the room with that cold smile. Every eye turned toward him. The jazz trio fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice carrying across the space. "Thank you all for being here today." My hand slipped into my pocket, closed around Michael's pencil. This was the moment I'd waited 20 years for. Preston Montgomery's voice cut through the room like a blade. "I want to talk about family," he said, glass raised. "About what it means to provide stability, to give a child the foundation they deserve." His eyes found mine across the room. That cold smile never wavered. 20 years ago, tragedy struck our community. Good men died at Silver Creek. Among them, Michael Hartwell, a man who left behind a daughter and a woman who tried her best. My chest tightened, but I kept my face neutral. Eleanor worked hard, I'll give her that. But raising a child requires more than determination. It requires resources, security, the kind of stability that comes from family wealth, from generations of careful stewardship. Around me, guests shifted uncomfortably. Connor's jaw clenched at the head table. Today I'm grateful that Savannah finally has what she always deserved, a real family. The Montgomery name carries weight in this town. It opens doors. It provides opportunities that others simply cannot offer. Savannah's face had gone pale. Her hand trembled on the table. "So let's raise our glasses to Savannah, finding the stability and security she was denied for so long, to the future she'll build with my son under the protection of the Montgomery legacy." The room remained quiet. A few guests reluctantly lifted their glasses. I stood, every head turned toward me. Preston's smile tightened at the edges. "That was beautiful, Mr. Montgomery." I said, my voice steady. "Really moving. But before we drink to the future, I think everyone should understand the past." I caught Rachel's eye across the room. She nodded once. "You talk about stability and family, about providing for Savannah." I moved toward the center where everyone could see me. "But you left out some details." The projection screens flickered to life behind Preston. His head whipped around. The first image appeared a bank transfer document. $6. $5 million dated 18 months ago from Montgomery Holdings to an offshore account. "That's Savannah's signature," I said, except Savannah never signed it, never saw it, never authorized any transfers. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Preston's face drained of color. The next slide, another transfer, same amount, different date. Then another, all bearing Savannah's forged signature. $13 million, I continued. Moved through Savannah's accounts to hide environmental violations at Summit Ridge. Grade 40 steel used in load-bearing structures when regulations required grade 60. The same corners cut at Silver Creek 20 years ago. The screen changed environmental reports highlighted sections showing structural deficiencies, cost-cutting measures, falsified inspection records. Preston's mouth opened, but no sound came out. David Walsh, your own CFO, kept copies of everything, every forged signature, every illegal transfer, every violation you planned to blame on my daughter. The final slide appeared Michael's face, young and smiling in his hard hat. Below it, white text against black Michael Hartwell died because Preston Montgomery chose profit over safety. He won't kill again. The room erupted, chairs scraped, voices overlapped, shock, anger, disbelief. Someone shouted for security. Connor moved to Savannah's side. She was shaking, tears streaming. But she wasn't looking at Preston. She was looking at me. Preston grabbed the podium, knuckles white. This is fabricated. Slander. I'll sue. With what? Rachel's voice rang out. The $7 million in assets the FBI froze this morning. More chaos, cameras flashing, people pushing toward exits. Preston's cold control shattered. His face twisted with rage as he stared at me. The room exploded into chaos. I appreciate you staying with me through this journey. Drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you're still here. Quick reminder, this narrative contains dramatized elements created for storytelling purposes. If this style doesn't resonate with you, feel free to pause here and explore other content that better suits your preferences. Preston Montgomery's voice cut through the room like a blade. I want to talk about family, he said, glass raised, about what it means to provide stability to give a child the foundation they deserve. His eyes found mine across the room. That cold smile never wavered. 20 years ago, tragedy struck our community. Good men died at Silver Creek. Among them, Michael Hartwell, a man who left behind a daughter and a woman who tried her best. My chest tightened, but I kept my face neutral. Eleanor worked hard, I'll give her that. But raising a child requires more than determination. It requires resources, security, the kind of stability that comes from family wealth, from generations of careful stewardship. Around me, guests shifted uncomfortably. Connor's jaw clenched at the head table. Today I'm grateful that Savannah finally has what she always deserved, a real family. The Montgomery name carries weight in this town. It opens doors. It provides opportunities that others simply cannot offer. Savannah's face had gone pale. Her hand trembled on the table. So let's raise our glasses to Savannah finding the stability and security she was denied for so long. To the future she'll build with my son under the protection of the Montgomery legacy. The room remained quiet. A few guests reluctantly lifted their glasses. I stood. Every head turned toward me. Preston's smile tightened at the edges. That was beautiful, Mr. Montgomery. I said, my voice steady, really moving. But before we drink to the future, I think everyone should understand the past. I caught Rachel's eye across the room. She nodded once. You talk about stability and family, about providing for Savannah. I moved toward the center where everyone could see me. But you left out some details. The projection screens flickered to life behind Preston. His head whipped around. The first image appeared a bank transfer document. $6. $5 million dated 18 months ago from Montgomery Holdings to an offshore account. That's Savannah's signature, I said, except Savannah never signed it, never saw it, never authorized any transfers. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Preston's face drained of color. The next slide, another transfer, same amount, different date, then another, all bearing Savannah's forged signature. $13 million, I continued, moved through Savannah's accounts to hide environmental violations at Summit Ridge. Grade 40 steel used in load-bearing structures when regulations required grade 60, the same corners cut at Silver Creek 20 years ago. The screen changed environmental reports, highlighted sections showing structural deficiencies, cost-cutting measures, falsified inspection records. Preston's mouth opened, but no sound came out. David Walsh, your own CFO, kept copies of everything, every forged signature, every illegal transfer, every violation you planned to blame on my daughter. The final slide appeared Michael's face, young and smiling in his hard hat. Below it, white text against black: Michael Hartwell died because Preston Montgomery chose profit over safety. He won't kill again. The room erupted, chairs scraped, voices overlapped, shock, anger, disbelief. Someone shouted for security. Connor moved to Savannah's side. She was shaking, tears streaming, but she wasn't looking at Preston. She was looking at me. Preston grabbed the podium, knuckles white. "This is fabricated slander. I'll sue with what?" Rachel's voice rang out. "The $7 million in assets the FBI froze this morning." More chaos, cameras flashing, people pushing toward exits. Preston's cold control shattered. His face twisted with rage as he stared at me. The room exploded into chaos. "I appreciate you staying with me through this journey. Drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you're still here. Quick reminder, this narrative contains dramatized elements created for storytelling purposes. If this style doesn't resonate with you, feel free to pause here and explore other content that better suits your preferences." Amid the chaos, I heard one sound that drowned out everything else: Savannah's sobs. She'd collapsed into her chair, face buried in her hands, shoulders heaving. The pristine white dress seemed to mock her now, all that carefully constructed perfection, crumbling in real time. I pushed through the crowd and knelt beside her. "Savannah." She looked up. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, eyes red and swollen. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Why didn't you defend me?" The question came out quieter than I'd intended. "At your apartment when I tried to warn you, why did you choose him?" "Because he said he'd destroy you." Her voice broke. "He told me if I sided with you at the wedding, he'd ruin your career. Make sure you never worked in this town again. And he'd tell Connor the baby wasn't his. He'd take everything, Connor, the baby, my future. He said if I stayed quiet, if I just cooperated, he'd leave you alone." My chest constricted. All those weeks thinking she'd rejected me. "You were trying to protect me." She nodded, tears flowing faster. "I thought if I gave him what he wanted, he'd stop. I thought that's what love was. Sacrifice. Keeping people safe, even when it hurt." Connor appeared at her other side, his hand finding hers. "She's been terrified for weeks," he said, looking at me. "My father blackmailed her, systematically, the same way he's manipulated everyone around him for decades." He turned toward where security held Preston. His father struggled against their grip, face purple with rage. "You did to her what you did to me my whole life," Connor said. His voice didn't rise, but something in it made nearby conversations quiet. "You made her believe that love meant obedience, that caring for someone meant letting them control you." Preston snarled something, but Connor kept talking. "I was 8 years old the first time you taught me that fear. 8. When you explained that weakness was a choice and real men don't cry, that Montgomery men control or they get controlled." Around us, guests had gone silent. "You broke my arm when I was 12 because I hesitated during a business presentation. You locked me in the basement overnight at 14 when I questioned one of your deals. You've spent 32 years teaching me that love is just another word for power." Preston lunged forward. Security tightened their hold. "But you were wrong." Connor straightened. "And I'm going to testify against you. I'm going to tell them everything, every crime, every threat, every manipulation. For Savannah, for Elle, for every person whose life you've destroyed." The main doors burst open. FBI agents moved through the crowd. A woman with silver hair and a badge stepped forward. "Preston Montgomery, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, blackmail, and corporate malfeasance, resulting in wrongful death." The snap of handcuffs echoed through the suddenly quiet ballroom. Preston's eyes found mine as they led him toward the door. No cold smile now, just naked hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed. But it was. We all knew it was. I watched them take him away, this man who'd haunted my life for 20 years, who'd killed Michael, who'd tried to destroy my daughter. Security parted the crowd, camera flashes erupted, and then he was gone. Savannah was still crying quieter now. Connor held her while she shook. Around us, the reception had dissolved into shocked murmurs and police radio static. Justice had finally arrived. But the hardest part wasn't watching him fall. It was what came next. The wedding meant to unite two families had torn one apart and begun healing the other. Outside the hotel, news vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions at anyone who emerged. Camera lights painted the falling snow in harsh white flashes. Inside the private suite, silence. Savannah sat on the edge of the bed, still in her wedding dress, staring at nothing. Her hands trembled in her lap. Connor stood by the window watching the media circus below. I pulled a chair across from her and sat down. "I understand if you can't forgive me," she whispered. The words hung between us. Part of me wanted to say it didn't matter, that everything was fine now, but that would be another lie, and we'd had enough of those. "You thought silence would save me," I said. But silence was exactly what he counted on. She looked up, eyes still red from crying. I was so scared. I know. I reached for her hand, then pulled back. But fear makes us complicit in evil even when we mean well, especially when we mean well. Her face crumpled. "I should have trusted you." "Yes." The honesty felt brutal but necessary. "You should have." Connor turned from the window. "Elle, she needs to hear this." I kept my eyes on Savannah. "What you did, I understand why. The blackmail, the threats, the impossible position he put you in. I understand all of it." I paused, choosing my words carefully. But understanding doesn't erase the pain. For weeks I thought my daughter had chosen the man who killed her father over me. I thought I'd lost you completely. That hurts, Savannah. It hurts in ways I can't just forgive because the truth came out. Tears streamed down her face. "What do I do?" "You live with it. You learn from it. You make sure you never let fear silence you again." I stood, my legs suddenly heavy. "And you give me time." "How much time?" "I don't know." The answer felt cruel, but it was honest. 20 years of fighting for her, and in the critical moment she'd believed I was too weak to handle the truth. That cut deeper than Preston's schemes ever could. Connor stepped forward. "I'll take care of her. I promise you that." "I know you will." I reached into my pocket, pulled out Michael's pencil. The wood felt warm from being carried close. "Your father built his empire on lies. Build your family on truth." I pressed it into his palm. He stared at it, then at me. This was Michael's. He carried it every day at Silver Creek. It survived the collapse when he didn't. My voice caught. It survived everything else, too. Let it remind you what real strength looks like. Connor's fingers closed around it. "Thank you." I looked at Savannah one last time. She was still crying quieter now. Part of me wanted to hold her to tell her everything would be okay, but we'd had enough comfortable lies. "Take care of each other," I said. "Take care of that baby. And when the trial comes, tell the truth. All of it, no matter how hard it gets." "Ella, please." Savannah started to stand. "I need to go." I walked to the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. Behind me, I heard Savannah's breath hitch, Connor's murmured comfort. The hallway was empty. Most guests had fled or been questioned by FBI agents. Somewhere downstairs, Rachel was probably coordinating with federal prosecutors. David Walsh was giving his statement. I took the service elevator down, slipped out the back entrance where the reporters hadn't gathered yet. Snow fell harder now, coating the parking lot in fresh white. My car sat alone under a streetlight. I got in, started the engine, and drove away from the wreckage of my daughter's wedding day. It would be 3 years before I saw her again. The wedding meant to unite two families had torn one apart and begun healing the other. Outside the hotel, news vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions at anyone who emerged. Camera lights painted the falling snow in harsh white flashes. Inside the private suite, silence. Savannah sat on the edge of the bed, still in her wedding dress, staring at nothing. Her hands trembled in her lap. Connor stood by the window watching the media circus below. I pulled a chair across from her and sat down. "I understand if you can't forgive me," she whispered. The words hung between us. Part of me wanted to say it didn't matter that everything was fine now, but that would be another lie, and we'd had enough of those. "You thought silence would save me," I said, but silence was exactly what he counted on. She looked up, eyes still red from crying. I was so scared. I know. I reached for her hand, then pulled back. But fear makes us complicit in evil even when we mean well, especially when we mean well. Her face crumpled. "I should have trusted you." Yes. The honesty felt brutal but necessary. "You should have." Connor turned from the window. "Elle!" "She needs to hear this." I kept my eyes on Savannah. "What you did, I understand why. The blackmail, the threats, the impossible position he put you in. I understand all of it." I paused, choosing my words carefully. But understanding doesn't erase the pain. For weeks I thought my daughter had chosen the man who killed her father over me. I thought I'd lost you completely. That hurts, Savannah. It hurts in ways I can't just forgive because the truth came out. Tears streamed down her face. "What do I do?" "You live with it. You learn from it. You make sure you never let fear silence you again." I stood my legs suddenly heavy. "And you give me time." "How much time?" "I don't know." The answer felt cruel, but it was honest. 20 years of fighting for her, and in the critical moment she'd believed I was too weak to handle the truth. That cut deeper than Preston's schemes ever could. Connor stepped forward. "I'll take care of her. I promise you that." "I know you will." I reached into my pocket, pulled out Michael's pencil. The wood felt warm from being carried close. "Your father built his empire on lies. Build your family on truth." I pressed it into his palm. He stared at it, then at me. This was Michael's. He carried it every day at Silver Creek. It survived the collapse when he didn't. My voice caught. It survived everything else, too. Let it remind you what real strength looks like. Connor's fingers closed around it. "Thank you." I looked at Savannah one last time. She was still crying quieter now. Part of me wanted to hold her to tell her everything would be okay, but we'd had enough comfortable lies. "Take care of each other," I said. "Take care of that baby, and when the trial comes, tell the truth. All of it, no matter how hard it gets." "Ella, please." Savannah started to stand. "I need to go." I walked to the door each step, feeling heavier than the last. Behind me, I heard Savannah's breath hitch, Connor's murmured comfort. The hallway was empty. Most guests had fled or been questioned by FBI agents. Somewhere downstairs, Rachel was probably coordinating with federal prosecutors. David Walsh was giving a statement. I took the service elevator down, slipped out the back entrance where the reporters hadn't gathered yet. Snow fell harder now, coating the parking lot in fresh white. My car sat alone under a streetlight. I got in, started the engine, and drove away from the wreckage of my daughter's wedding day. It would be 3 years before I saw her again. For 3 years, I watched my daughter's life from a distance. Janet became my eyes. She'd call every few weeks with updates, careful never to push, just offering information if I wanted it. I always wanted it. Year 1 was brutal. Savannah spiraled after the wedding depression so severe she could barely get out of bed. Connor hired a therapist specializing in trauma. Savannah went twice a week, sometimes more. The baby arrived in June. 7 pounds, healthy lungs, Connor's eyes. They named him Michael. Janet told me that part in person sitting at my kitchen table with tears in her eyes. She said she wanted him to carry his grandfather's name, to remember the man who taught her real strength even if she'd forgotten it for a while. I cried for an hour after Janet left. Year 2 brought slow progress. Savannah started volunteering at the community kitchen on Tuesdays, serving meals to families struggling the way we once had. She read to kids at the library on Thursdays. Small steps, Janet said, but consistent ones. Connor kept working not at Montgomery Holdings, which no longer existed, but at a workers' rights nonprofit. He used his business degree to help unions negotiate safety protections. "He's good with the baby," Janet reported. Patient. Nothing like his father. Year 3 marked a shift. Savannah started taking online classes in nonprofit management. She threw herself into understanding advocacy work, grant writing, community organizing. Then in March, her application arrived on Janet's desk. Janet ran day-to-day operations of the Michael Hartwell Memorial Fund, while I focused on policy work. We'd grown into a recognized advocacy organization, 3 full-time staff, an annual budget of $2 million, partnerships with unions across Wyoming. We needed an outreach coordinator. Savannah's cover letter was 3 pages long. I want to honor the grandfather my son will never meet, she wrote. I want to make amends for my silence when courage was required. I understand if my last name disqualifies me, but I'm asking for the chance to spend my career fighting for the protections my grandfather died without. Janet brought the application to my office, set it on my desk without a word. I read it 3 times. She doesn't know you run this, Janet said quietly. She thinks you're still doing freelance consulting. She has no idea the fund is yours. I stared at the resume. 3 years of volunteer work. References from the community kitchen, the library, her therapist. A letter from Connor describing her transformation from someone paralyzed by fear into someone determined to prevent others from suffering the same paralysis. Schedule the interview, I said. Janet conducted it 2 weeks later. I watched from my office doorway, hidden from view. Savannah wore a simple blue dress, hair pulled back. She talked about understanding shame, about the responsibility of those who stay silent, about wanting Michael, her son, to grow up, knowing his mother fought for something that mattered. I can't undo what I did, she told Janet, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure other people don't make the same mistakes, that they don't let fear turn them into bystanders. Her voice cracked on the last word, but she didn't look away. Janet hired her on the spot. 6 months later, she walked into my office. At first, she didn't realize the office was mine. Savannah arrived at 9 sharp, wearing the same blue dress from her interview. Janet had told her the director wanted to meet. I'd been watching the clock since 8. When she knocked, my hand trembled on the doorknob. 3.5 years since I'd spoken to her. I opened the door. Her face went white. The folder in her hands dropped, papers scattering. Mom! Her voice broke. You run this place. Your grandfather's legacy. I couldn't let it die with him. She stared at me, tears streaming. I applied because I wanted to prove I could become someone worthy of his name. I didn't know why. The question came out harder than I intended. Why does it matter now? Because I disappointed you. I disappointed him. I disappointed myself. She wiped her face with shaking hands. I spent 3 years trying to be better, trying to understand how I let fear make me complicit. She bent down, gathered the papers, pulled out a worn notebook. This is my journal. 3 years of therapy sessions, volunteer hours, moments when I wanted to give up but didn't. I documented everything to prove to myself I was changing. She held it out. I took it, flipped through pages of her handwriting, entries about shame, about learning to speak up even when her voice shook, about Connor teaching her that love doesn't demand silence. One entry from a year ago. Michael smiled at me today, and I thought about how Dad used to smile at Mom. Connor says I have his eyes. I want to be someone those eyes can be proud of. My throat tightened. Savannah. The outer door burst open. Small footsteps thundered across Janet's office. Mommy, can we see the pictures now? A 3-year-old boy ran into the doorway and stopped staring up at me with eyes I'd know anywhere. Michael's eyes, dark brown with that same bright curiosity. He had Connor's nose, Savannah's mouth, but those eyes were pure Hartwell. Baby, wait outside, Savannah said softly, but I couldn't look away. This was Michael's grandson, the boy who carried his name. I knelt down slowly. Hi there, I managed. Hi. He tilted his head. Are you the boss? Mommy says the boss helped lots of people. Something in my chest cracked open. I try to help. What's your name? Michael. Like my grandpa, who was brave. He said it with 3-year-old certainty. I'm gonna be brave too when I grow up. I reached out, touched his face, soft skin warm under my fingers. He didn't pull away, just looked at me with those impossible eyes. Behind him, Savannah was crying quietly. He talks about Dad, she whispered. I tell him stories, the ones you told me, about the pencil, about Dad's letters, about how he fought for people. I looked up at her, this woman who'd broken my heart and spent 3 years trying to piece it back together. I know I can't undo what I did, she said. I know forgiveness isn't something I can earn, but I'm asking anyway, not for me, for him. She nodded at Michael, so he can know his grandmother. The little boy was still watching me, patient and curious. This wasn't forgiveness, not yet. The hurt was still real, but maybe it was a beginning. 6 months after that morning, we planted a tree at Silver Creek Mine. Spring had come to Wyoming, tentative with cold mornings giving way to warm afternoons. The memorial site looked different now. The granite marker had been joined by benches, walking paths, a small garden maintained by volunteers. Today we were planting trees, 14 aspens, one for each man who died. The community came out. Families of the victims, Rachel with her camera, David Walsh helping organize the crowd. Connor spoke first, standing beside the marker with his hand on his son's shoulder. My father taught me that strength meant control. It took me 32 years to understand that real strength is admitting when you're wrong. Real building means creating something that lasts because it's built on truth. Quiet applause rippled through the gathering. Savannah stood beside me, holding a young aspen. We'd been working together for 6 months now, careful distance, professional boundaries, but present. She'd proven herself good at the work, determined in a way that felt earned. We still hadn't fully reconciled. Maybe we never would. But we showed up. Little Michael tugged at my sleeve, holding a child-sized shovel. Grandma L, can I help dig? The name still caught me off guard, but I nodded, led him to the spot marked for Michael Hartwell's tree. We dug together, his small hands alongside mine. Savannah knelt beside him, guiding the root ball. Connor steadied the trunk while we filled in the earth. This one's for your grandpa, I told Michael. The one you're named after. Because he was brave, Michael said seriously. And he helped people. Yes, he did. After the ceremony, the 3 of us walked the memorial path. Michael ran ahead, chasing a butterfly. Mom, Savannah's voice was quiet. I know I can't fix what I did. No, I agreed. You can't. She nodded. But I can keep building forward. I can make sure Michael grows up knowing that silence isn't safety. Michael. The little boy had stopped at the marker, tracing the names. Grandma L, come see. He pointed at his grandfather's name, 4th from the top. Daddy says you built everything. Can you teach me, so I can build things too? I pulled Michael's pencil from my pocket, the one I'd given Connor at the wedding, the one he'd returned during the trial. The wood was worn smooth from decades of carrying. I knelt down, placed it in Michael's small hand. This was your grandpa's. He taught me that the strongest buildings start with truth. Not with what looks good or what's easy, but with what's real and honest, even when it's hard. Michael studied the faded words, build to last. Savannah's tears fell quietly beside me. We're not where we were, I said, looking at her. We probably never will be, but we're here. That's something. She wiped her eyes. It's everything. Michael handed the pencil back. Keep it safe, Grandma, until I'm big enough. I will. We stood together 3 generations while Wyoming wind moved through the young aspens. Around us, the memorial held 14 names, 14 trees, the weight of 20 years, finally acknowledged. They call it revenge. I call it restoration. Not restoring what was lost that can never be rebuilt, but restoring what must exist, integrity, justice, and the belief that even shattered foundations can support new growth. The young aspen swayed in the breeze roots, finding purchase in soil that had held too much pain for too long. Build to last. We were trying. Looking back now, I see the cost of silence more clearly than ever. Don't be like me. Don't wait 20 years to speak your truth. When you see injustice, when powerful people crush the vulnerable, don't convince yourself that patience is wisdom. God gave us voices to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. I learned that family drama stories like mine aren't just about revenge or justice. They're about choices we make when fear tries to silence us. Savannah chose silence thinking it would protect me. I chose silence for 2 decades thinking I wasn't strong enough alone. Both of us were wrong. The grandma stories you hear usually end with wisdom freely given with forgiveness, flowing like honey. Real life is messier. Real reconciliation takes years, not moments. Here's what I learned. God doesn't call us to be comfortable. He calls us to be courageous. When I finally stopped waiting for someone else to deliver justice and started building it myself, that's when healing began. Not just for me, but for an entire community. These family drama stories teach us that love without accountability becomes complicity, that grandma stories worth telling are the ones where we admit our failures alongside our victories, that God's justice sometimes requires human hands willing to do the hard work. Build your foundations on truth even when lies seem easier. Speak up even when your voice shakes. I appreciate you staying through this entire journey. Drop a 2 in the comments so I know you made it to the end. Quick reminder, this narrative includes dramatized elements designed for storytelling and reflection. If this style doesn't resonate with you, feel free to explore other content. What family drama stories have shaped your life? Share your experiences below your story might help someone else. Subscribe for more authentic grandma stories about courage, redemption, and healing.